Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar, Inclusive Reading. I am Ronny Khuri, Associate Editor, Books for Youth at Booklist. Before we begin, I will go over some technical details. If you're in the audience, you are in listen-only mode, but we do welcome any questions that you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so that they can follow up with you after the webinar. Links to today's slides were included in the reminder email that you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the slides at any time by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Allison McLaughlin, Marketing Manager at Owlkids, author Keandra Jones, who will be presenting on behalf of Choose Your Own Adventure, Nicole Duguay, Digital Marketer and Sales Coordinator at Lorimer Children and Teens, Wendy Vincent, Library Brand Manager at Rourke Educational Media, and finally, we will end today's webinar by revisiting a wonderful presentation by children's librarian Amy Seto Forrester, which was previously recorded for our Middle Grade Mania webinar last year. And first, we will hear from Allison McLaughlin. Allison is the marketing manager at Owlkids Books, based in Toronto, Canada, where she works with a wonderful team to spread the word about great books. She has loved seeing kids' books become more inclusive in many different ways with every season during the now almost decade that she has been in the industry. Welcome, Allison. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. I hope you're well. I'm happy to be here today. Owlkids Books is an independent publisher. We publish for ages 0 to 14, everything from board books and picture books to nonfiction, chapter books, and some graphic novels. In the US, we are distributed by Publishers Group West, and we have some really great titles to share with you today. So I'm excited to cover a few different ways our books explore the idea of inclusive reading. So I'm going to start off with Own Voices books, which are by authors who are writing stories that are authentic to their own origins, cultural backgrounds, and experiences. First up is The Paper Boat. We are really excited about this one. It just published this week, and it has stars from Booklist, Kirkus, School Library Journal, and the Bulletin of the Center for Children's Books. And it's a Kirkus Most Anticipated Book for Fall, plus one of 10 to Note by 100 Scope Notes. It's off to a great start. It is a wordless picture book, and it tells the story of one family's refugee journey. It's inspired by the author's family's own escape from Vietnam when she was a child. And you may know Tao Lam's previous books up on the screen there. All have been librarian favorites. And let's hear for a moment from the author Tao herself. I'm gonna play a little video clip.
The Paper Boat is about the flight of refugees. I was 2 when my family fled Vietnam. It was my mother and my father. My mom was 3 months pregnant, and we got on a homemade boat and crossed the South China Sea. We landed in Malaysia, where a refugee camp was set up, and we stayed there for 6 months before we accepted the Canadian government's offer to start a new life in Canada. The Paper Boat.
So really amazing, true story. Like most of Tao's other books, this one is wordless, and it uses paper collage to show the family's escape intertwined with a parallel narrative about ants. So the story starts with a young girl who's at home in Vietnam rescuing ants from a bowl of sugar water that was set out to trap them. And later, when her family flees, they end up following a trail of ants to the water. That detail is true to Tao's family's own story. So in the book, you see the family's journey overseas represented by a paper boat with the ants on board. The trip is really dangerous, the boat is fragile, but ultimately they do arrive safely in a new home and a hopeful new beginning. This is a really great book to open conversations with kids about their own family's journeys and origins. I showed you just a clip of the video, but in the longer version, Tao talks much more about that idea. If you would like the video link or an educator's guide, please do comment in the chat here and we'll make sure we get them to you later. Next up, here is a sneak peek at Tao's next book, coming in spring 2021. So this is a picture book called simply Tao. Once again, it's inspired by her own experiences. It's lighthearted, it's funny, but it's also very sensitive. So this is a story about growing up with a name that might be unfamiliar to the kids around you, as Tao did when she came to North America. This book is not wordless, it does have text, it plays with typography, and it uses a mix of collage and also childhood photos of Tao. We discover all the different names she was called at school when nobody could pronounce her name properly. So she decides to go by something easy, Jennifer, and it feels better for a while until she opens her lunchbox one day to find the Vietnamese spring rolls that she loves. Those are Tao's favorite. It feels a lot more comfortable and enjoyable to be herself. So this is great for introducing ideas of identity, empathy, diversity, inclusion, and just being yourself. So look for it in April. Moving on, we have Maurice and His Dictionary. This is new in October. It's a graphic novel for middle grade readers and also based on a true story. So the author, Carrie Fagan, is telling a story inspired by his father's journey as a boy during the Holocaust. This one highlights themes of resilience and the power of education. So the story follows the family, who are Jewish, as they are fleeing their home in Belgium during the Second World War. They end up in Jamaica in an internment camp, and all the while Maurice carries a beloved English dictionary and he dreams of being a lawyer. The dictionary really becomes a symbol of hope as he overcomes a wide range of obstacles and eventually fulfills his dream. And what's amazing is these details are all true. Carrie's father really did have this dictionary. You can see it there, and it sits on Carrie's desk to this day. His father has since sadly passed away, but the book was written as a real tribute to him and to his perseverance. Moving ahead, we have A Little Miss Lou. This one published just a year ago. It's a picture book biography about Jamaican poet Louise Bennett Coverley, who was known for popularizing the use of patois with her poetry. So this book focuses on her childhood, finding her own voice when the style of language she was learning at school was really at odds with the language that she lived and breathed all around her. The author, Nadia El Han, is herself of Jamaican descent. This is a great choice if you're looking to expand your collection of books by authors of color or featuring experiences of Black girls and women. As well, it has a really positive message about the power and the joy of language and language arts. We also have a great author interview video available and an educator's guide, so just comment if you'd like the links and we'll get those to you later. One more here in the category of own voices. This is another sneak peek at a book coming spring 2021. So Carry On is for middle grade readers. It's a book of poems written by young immigrants about their experiences. This one has a really interesting backstory. It started as a creative writing project in a high school. So on each spread, you see a poem that was written by one of the young newcomers, and it's paired with the poet's own portrait or a portrait of another member of the class. The poetry, it's simple, it's very powerful, and it covers a diversity of origins. And what's neat about these poets, they're dealing with very common themes for that age: identity, their place in the world, fitting in, but with the additional challenge of adjusting to a new country. So as well as the lived experiences of own voices authors, we have books celebrating families of all kinds. First, I will show you The Egg. This is new this fall from Geraldo Valerio. Also some starred reviews here in from Kirkus and Booklist. Thank you, Booklist. It's a wordless book and it celebrates non-traditional families. So through the collage art, we see a bird that has lost his egg in a terrible storm. And then coming across another egg all alone, the bird decides to care for it and raise it as its own. When the egg hatches, it turns out to be a human baby. My favorite spread is this one at the end, which shows all kinds of different parent-child pairs. It really celebrates that family is what you make it, and however you make it is beautiful. The wordless narrative here allows plenty of room for different interpretation or discussion about topics like foster parenting or adoption or different kinds of caregivers. Moving now to My Cat Looks Like My Dad. I hope that title gives you a little laugh. This was one of our top titles in the book list Editor's Choice from 2019 by Tao Lam, whose new books I showed at the beginning. In this one, the narrator is sharing all the ways their cat and their dad are alike. They love belly rubs and morning stretches, and they look alike too. In the end, there's a surprising twist where we see the narrator is actually a bird. So family is mom, dad, cat, and bird. This book celebrates families in all their configurations. Moving now to some titles with central characters that represent a variety of different identities, perspectives, and in whom we hope a wide range of kids will see themselves. So You and Me Both is new from this past spring. It's a preschool age book that was inspired by a story that went viral on Facebook about two boys who were best friends, one black, one white, and they asked for the same haircut so they could look like twins. Because these two enjoy all the same things, they think they must be twins, even though they don't look alike on the surface. It's a really joyful, playful take on friendship and respect. Raj's Rule for the Bathroom at School. This is new, it published last month. It's a really sweet, funny story, relatable story about a kid who's afraid of using the bathroom at school. I like how this book, it's inclusive both in terms of the kids who are represented, but also that it normalizes a really commonly felt anxiety. So Raj gets by with some very strict rules, no laughing, no drinking juice, but it's really hard for him to enjoy his day until one day a sneeze forces him to face his fears. Few others from the backlist here. Love You Head to Toe, available in board book and hardcover, is an adorable baby book. On each spread, it shows babies' activities compared to different newborn animals. The human families are diverse and the collage art is really beautiful. And by the same artist, we have Up, which is also available in hardcover and board book. The board book edition is called Upsy Daisy Baby. You'll see it on the screen there. This is based on research about all the different ways that babies are carried around the world. It shows a wide variety of caregivers of different ages, genders, abilities. Next, I Am Josephine. This is all about living things. So what's the difference between a mammal, an animal, a living thing, and where do kids fit in? It's sweet, it's upbeat, and it's available in paperback too. Finally, in this category, we have Golden Threads, which explores the Japanese concept of kintsugi, which is where broken pottery is repaired with gold that's glued to actually highlight its cracks. With plenty of starred reviews, this is a story about a toy that's lost and found and then repaired and loved. And the artwork by Japanese-Canadian artist Amy Seto is really amazing. Finally, one last series to show you on the topic of neurodiversity. The West Meadows Detective Series is a group of early chapter books. They feature Myron and his friend Hajra, and they solve mysteries at school. Myron is on the autism spectrum and Hajra has ADHD, and together these strengths make them a really great team. So these are all in paperback, and they've been really well received. So that is all for today. If you would like any further info or the resources I mentioned, please email me or my colleague Taylor. We'll be very happy to get you what you need. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Allison. Next up, we will hear from Keandra Jones. Keandra received a creative writing BFA from Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. She was born and raised in South Florida, so when she thinks of home, she likes to muse that she is in a sunshine state of mind. Her poetry and prose have been published in various college literary publications and magazines such as Red Weather, Grasping Roots, The Blacklist Journal, and The Underground. Opportunities like having her first short story published by Living Spring Publishers in Stories Through the Ages, College Edition 2017, inspired Keandra to take her writing to new heights. Working for Choose Your Own Adventure has been the highlight of her career, and she cannot wait to see what other adventures await her. She values reading, writing, laughing, and promoting universal kindness, and she lives in the Miami area with her dog, Noble. Take it away, Keandra.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Hello, beautiful people. My name is Keandra Jones, and I'm the author of Choose Your Own Adventure SPIES, James Armistead Lafayette, and Choose Your Own Adventure SPIES, Mary Bowser, which will come out October 1st. And my presentation is called A Book is More Than a Book. It's actually speaking to what many presenters will talk about today when they talk about inclusive reading and how it's valuable. Next slide, Grace. Thank you. And so to begin this presentation, I will be reading a poem I wrote about this very topic. A book is more than a book. I have been broken and mended by books. I have been captured and set free. I have been invisible and I have earned looks. I have been taught to question, to embrace possibility. I have been captured and set free. Each book extinguished or fueled my dreams. I have been taught to question and to embrace possibility. I have been lost and found in the reams. Each book extinguished or fueled my dreams. I learned to choose my books wisely. I have been lost and found in the reams. Words are dangerous, words are mighty. I learned to choose my books wisely. I have been invisible and I have earned looks. Words are dangerous, words are mighty. I have been broken and mended by books. And so I begin the presentation with this poem because it just speaks to why the work that you all do is so important and why inclusive reading is absolutely crucial to a child's development of self, their conceptualization of self, and just how they feel as they journey into the real world from their fictional ones. And I've always loved books. I've always been a bookworm. I read at least 500 books before I even reached middle school, so definitely a book nerd, loved it so much. And there are so many books that changed my life just because I held them, just because I was able to see, girls with glasses, Black girls, athletic girls, girly girls. So it was so important to see books of every walk of life and that touched upon any aspect of my identity because it made me feel more real as a person. It's funny how fictional worlds can do that, but if you're a book lover, you understand that concept, that books do more than what you think they do. So when I say I've been invisible and I've earned looks, it's because I didn't see myself in many books. And even when I was holding certain books, people were like, what is she doing? Like, why isn't she dancing or singing or, playing a game? Why is she holding a book? And so that's what I mean by that. And when I say extinguish or fuel my dreams, it's so important to not only have books by authors of color, by authors that are differently abled, by authors that are from various backgrounds, their characters also should reflect these identities to show children of every background that they are important, that they are valuable, and that their existence is common and beautiful, and just the aspect of why this world is so rich in the people who make it up. So that was really important for me to sort of begin this presentation with this idea of words being dangerous or mighty, depending on how you wield them, and depending on what they're saying, what they're achieving when given to a child. And so next slide, Grace. As I said, I wrote a Choose An Adventure book called Choose An Adventure SPIES, James Armistead Lafayette. And for those of you who do not know, a Choose An Adventure book is a game book series in which you are the main character of the story and you get to decide what happens from beginning to end. And so a whole beautiful part of a Choose An Adventure book is possibility, is being able to decide and have a role in the story and to have agency and control. And so it's really exciting for reluctant readers. And it's even more exciting for me to be able to showcase these characters that otherwise would not be front of mind, that would not be part of the conversation or discourse of history. And so James Armistead Lafayette was a real historical figure, and he was alive during 1781. He was a brave, literate, enslaved person with the most critical choice of his life, and that was to join the Revolutionary Army or to find freedom on his own terms in my book. So he was a real historical figure, but in my book, he's actually able to break the bounds of history, and that he isn't only going to go into the Revolutionary Army, which is what he really did in real life, but he's also able to find freedom on his own terms. And this question was sort of created because of my personal experience as a Black person, as a woman of color. And I wondered, what would James want, the real life James, if he was able to have a role in his own liberation, have a role in the genesis of what would become his country. And so it's beautiful that the real James had the ability to have Marquis de Lafayette of France help him gain independence, as he helped America gain independence by gaining intel on the Battle of Yorktown, which is a story we don't really hear, right? We hear a lot about George Washington, Marquis de Lafayette, if you watch Hamilton, but we don't hear about James Armistead Lafayette, even though he played a critical role in America gaining independence. And so something that I gifted to him in his fictional sense was the ability to choose that freedom for himself, to go on and become who he was always meant to be. He isn't a slave, he's an enslaved person who was basically persecuted because of the color of his skin during this time. And yet, as you go through the book, you realize he's someone who must have been brave, who must have been fun, who must have been just someone you would want to emulate and want to know and become, because he is a hero who through and through. So that was really amazing to show to kids. Next slide. And so that brings us to this question of like, why is a book more than a book? Why is a book more than a book? So inspiring a child to read empowers a child to dream. And showing a child books by authors of different backgrounds ensures the child's limitlessness of that child's dreams. So as a kid, I always saw characters that they would look like me sometimes, but they wouldn't really reflect sort of the honor or the diversity and nuance of people of color or of women. And so it was really important to show James in a way that he wasn't just athletic and he wasn't just a body or this person who was like, you know, strong, but someone who didn't think. So James, he thinks. He is someone who is resourceful. He's an advocate for others. He helps Native Americans in the book draw a bridge between the Revolutionary Army and Native Americans. So he's someone who's like, just by being himself, by being a Black man during a time in which he was considered property, he's already a natural bridge into how do we better treat our fellow man, our fellow person? How do we better build this country to suit all those who are a part of it? And representation literature matters because it allows those in marginalized communities to redefine what is possible for themselves. I definitely think that a lot of the moments in this book that are so strong, the conversations about personhood and country and race and right and wrong and how just to be empathetic towards one another, comes from my own positioning as a Black woman in America. And getting a child to care about a book involves showing a child that books care about them, their identities, their histories, and their futures. This book definitely cares about every person who reads it, but specifically those who feel like they were not seen or they were erased or they weren't really valued until they saw themselves in this positioning where they could be strong and resilient and someone of the status of a hero. Next slide, please. And that brings me to my second book, which again comes out October 1st. It's called Choose Adventure SPIES, Mary Bowser. And in this book, you are Mary Bowser, a spy in Virginia. You are a lifelong friend of Elizabeth Bett Van Loo, a Quaker from a wealthy Richmond household who organized a ring of women to spy in plain sight to help the Union during the Civil War. Next slide, please. And in this book, Mary Bowser is so important because she's talking about a time period that we don't really feel that far away from, and talking about racial division in the country, this idea again of right and wrong. And there's this beautiful quote by Robin Hobbs that says, "The past is no further away than the last breath you took." The past is no further away than the last breath you took. It was super important for me to be able to present just how close the past is by talking about Mary through my lens as a modern woman, and being able to still have that same conversation of right and wrong. So it is important. Why is female representation so important in books? It is important to challenge gender roles and norms that do not necessarily apply to every woman. For example, Mary Bowser is a woman and she wields a sword. Mary is a woman and she's smart, calculating, and brave. Too often in books, women are characterized as weak, broken, timid, or forced to act different to please the men in the room. Mary is not weak, but she does draw attention to how the women in her time were viewed as feeble. Nor does she hesitate to reveal her intelligence in a room full of high-ranking male officials or soldiers. Yes, Mary wears dresses, but she also wears shirts and trousers. Mary cooks and cleans. She also wrestles and rides horseback. Mary is someone that any reader of any background would be very excited to become because she's unapologetic, she's a little feisty, she's fun, and she demands that her country rise to the occasion of being a country where everyone feels comfortable, where everyone is equal, and where everyone has a chance at true liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Next slide. So for any ordering information, you have that on the screen. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. I'm super excited to have you all learn more about Mary Bowser or James Armistead Lafayette. Again, they are real historical figures, so let's go learn some history and be really happy to see how it functions in our present and there and in our future.
Thank you so much, Keandra. We will now hear from Nicole Duguay. Nicole is the digital marketer and sales coordinator for Lorimer Kids and Teens. After spending some time in the world of scientific publishing, Nicole is now focused on getting books into the hands of readers who want to see their own lives reflected on the page. She's a strong advocate for LGBTQ+ voices and diverse intersectional representation in media. Nicole lives in Toronto. Thank you for joining us today, Nicole.
Hi, thanks, Ronnie. I'm going to talk a little bit about our company and what we mean by inclusion before I dive into our books. Lorimer has been publishing fiction and nonfiction since 1975. Our Children and Teens imprint specifically focuses on diverse books for middle grade and young adult. The majority of our books are high-low to engage reluctant readers, some in series and some standalone. We're very proud to have many own voices authors writing about their experiences from a first-hand point of view. When we talk about inclusion, we mean the inclusion of diverse characters. The characters in Lorimer titles come from a wide variety of cultural backgrounds and ethnicities. Our protagonists and their friends have different physical and mental abilities. They represent a spectrum of gender identities, not just cisgender boys and girls, and they come from different socioeconomic situations and family circumstances, even within the same book. When we talk about inclusion, we also mean the inclusion of diverse authors. Whenever we can, we publish authors who write using their own voices, as we heard the explanation of earlier. They write characters who are true to their own lived experiences, which gives our readers an authentic view of the story at hand. Now to get into our books. First up, we have two different series with books printed in dyslexia-friendly fonts with fun typography and artwork. The different books in each series deal with different topics that kids will encounter in their everyday lives. We're proud that these will resonate with kids with issues like ADHD or anxiety who don't usually see characters their own age dealing with the same types of things. But first, I'll give you a quick overview of what makes a book dyslexia friendly. They're printed in a font to help with some of the symptoms of dyslexia, like confusion caused by flipping and swapping letters while reading. Wide margins and spacing between lines and paragraphs are used to help break up the text. No hyphenation is used for words that aren't usually split. Even the physical attributes of the books themselves have been taken into consideration. Heavy matte paper reduces glare and prevents show-through from the other side of the page. Our first dyslexia-friendly series is called The Secret Games of Maximus Todd. Max Todd is a young kid with ADHD. The various titles in this series take readers through common scenarios kids will be familiar with, like going to the doctor, playing soccer, where Max needs to overcome his wiggles and jitters and super fidgets to focus on the task at hand. Our second dyslexia-friendly series is called Be Brave, Morgan. Morgan is a young kid with anxiety. The series presents readers with situations where Morgan has to overcome his fears, like riding new rides at the fall fair or standing up to bullies teasing a classmate. This shows kids that although something may be unknown, they can be brave enough to face it, just like Morgan. Our illustrated humor series features relatable and lovable characters teaching life lessons about friendship, bullying, self-esteem, and achieving goals. Comic strip style illustrations throughout keep reluctant readers engaged. They're perfect for bridging the gap between graphic novels and full text novels. So a quick overview of our latest illustrated humor titles. In The Fake Chicken Kung Fu Fighting Blues, fun title there, 12-year-old Anthony is devastated when his family moves from Chinatown to a remote northern community. There are no other Asian families around, and the move is very hard on his grandmother Popo, who doesn't speak English and puts a fake chicken over the front door for luck. As Anthony discovers the joys of small-town life, his friends get an introduction to his Chinese culture, and even Popo begins to feel at home. In Mermaid Warrior Squad, Dylan arrives at a summer arts camp and immediately bonds with outgoing Coral over the aquatic theme of the camp and a love of comic books. When Coral's in-your-face behavior draws the attention of the camp mean girls and a boy who's determined to prank the camp's final show, Dylan has a decision to make. Should she stay behind the scenes, or should she channel her inner mermaid warrior to save Coral and the show? In Superhero Ninja Wrestling Star, Archie comes back from his summer away to find he is the only kid in grade 6 who hasn't grown bigger. Even his best friends Alfie and Shamini have gotten taller. Archie knows that if only he can be more like the heroes of his favorite comic books, he'll be able to keep the older boys from teasing Shamini. From practicing the ninja crawl to bulking up with exercise and a high-protein diet, how can Archie fail? Our Deal With It series focuses on difficult issues kids face every day by presenting the problem from everyone's perspective: perpetrator, target, and bystander. Engaging illustrations feature students with diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds and gender identities. Q&As feature real-life scenarios and helpful answers, and fun quizzes let kids test and improve their understanding. First up is consent, which isn't just about sex. As much as kids need to be taught that kissing, hugging, and touching are sometimes appropriate and sometimes not, it's important that they consider that consent is needed for commonplace interactions, like borrowing things, sharing possessions, or giving away someone's secrets. This book helps kids think critically about what consent is and what it looks like and sounds like when it is given or not given. Everyone has rights, but navigating our rights can be difficult. We have the right to freedom of expression, but there are many places where this freedom is limited by laws, rules, and regulations, or even customs such as good manners. By exploring the viewpoints of the censor, the speech maker, and the witness, freedom of expression helps readers navigate issues of how to express identity and opinion. Transphobia offers information to help kids better understand gender identity and determine what they can do to identify and counter transphobia in their schools, homes, and communities. Considered from the viewpoint of gender challengers, gender enforcers, and witnesses, transphobic behavior is identified, examined, and put into a context that kids can use to understand and accept themselves and others for whatever gender they are, even if that's no gender at all. Sports stories are action-driven sports novels that turn reluctant readers into all-star readers. They feature characters with diverse racial, physical, mental, and economic backgrounds playing a wide variety of sports. In The Comeback, 14-year-old Chris is pretty average, playing hockey and has friends, but underneath it all, Chris is depressed. He's full of self-blame and negative thoughts, so he quits his hockey team, feeling like he's let them down. However, his doctor suggests that he should pick up another sport. He starts playing soccer. But former hockey teammate Trent is on the team, and his suspicions about Chris and his emotional state threaten Chris's acceptance and recovery. In Rugby Rivals, Sam's grandfather Pops always taught Sam that the most important aspects of rugby are sportsmanship and teamwork. He has trouble fitting in with the snobby Rosedale team, especially Bittner, who resents Sam's presence. In an act of retaliation, Sam breaks a teammate's nose, and he knows he's lost sight of what rugby is supposed to be about. Can Sam play the kind of rugby that will make Pops proud? In Long Bomb, Ed worries that he's too tall, too skinny, and too insecure, the exact opposite of star quarterback Tyrone Jackson. Wanting to contribute to the school's football team in some way, Ed accepts the job of water boy. When the team's top receiver gets injured, Ed joins the team as backup receiver. Can Ed catch a crucial pass and make his dreams of becoming a football hero true? Record books help reluctant readers understand social issues like racism and conflict by telling true stories of sports heroes. They're written with a flair that makes sports icons come alive, and they're also really great for ESL or adult readers. Often the center of controversy for his outspoken attitude, P.K. Subban's story has evolved into an incredible family story of 3 first-generation born-in-Canada brothers who, starting with P.K., were all drafted into the NHL. Willie O'Ree quietly made history at the Montreal Forum on January 18th, 1958, where he became the first Black player to take the ice. This book traces the early life of O'Ree in Fredericton, New Brunswick, which is almost my hometown. His journey to the NHL, highlights from his hockey career, and his work in encouraging diversity in the NHL. It wasn't until 2003 that Jordan Tootoo became the first Inuk to play in an NHL game. He's had to overcome social problems that are associated with the North, fight his way through the discrimination and culture shock he encountered after leaving Rankin Inlet and moving to Alberta to play in the juniors, and see his way through the grief of losing his NHL-bound older brother and hero, Terrence, to suicide in 2002. This new updated biography explores the struggles and accomplishments of the most recognized young role model for young Aboriginal and Inuit people today. Real Love is a collection of high-low novels that focus on LGBTQ+ teen relationships. The novels feature diverse characters in contemporary settings as they experience love, romance, dating, sex, body image, and more. These contemporary YA romances are from Own Voices authors who write from real-world experience. In Ace of Hearts, everyone around Alvin seems to be obsessed with one thing: sex. The closer Alvin gets to being physical with someone, the more he's uncertain that this is for him, and he begins to wonder if he's asexual. Can Alvin find the love that's right for him? In We Three, Jassy quickly makes 2 new friends at summer camp, Ams and Sydney. The problem is that Jassy realizes she's got romantic feelings for both of them. It seems like she may have missed her chance at both love and friendship, since Ams and Sid only seem to have eyes for each other, until Ams and Sid tell Jassy they want to be with her too. In What Makes You Beautiful, Logan likes boys and trying on girls' clothes, secrets Logan's family doesn't know. After being bullied for being too effeminate and weird, Logan transfers to an art school, which has a more inclusive community where everyone seems comfortable just being themselves. Slowly, Logan starts to accept being a gender other than male and expresses it as Veronica. But will Logan find love as Veronica? Side Streets are edgy, fast-paced novels that combine real-world themes and believable characters to make for short, heart-stopping books. Themes include crime, family and social class, substance abuse, relationships and sexuality, risk-taking, and mental health. In Cold Grab, Angelo is moved to Toronto from the Philippines to join his mom. Adjusting to a new country isn't easy for Angelo. He meets Marcus at the Filipino Community Center and Felix and Darius at school. They lure Angelo into running petty thefts as a way of proving his friendship. But when Angelo is accused of stealing something valuable from the house his mom cleans, she loses her job. In Locked Up, Kevin took a car for a joyride when he was 15 and got in an accident that seriously injured a pedestrian. When his parole officer suggests that he apply for early parole after spending more than 2 years in juvenile detention, he realizes that it would be hard for him to survive on the outside. He feels he doesn't ever deserve to be let out because he ruined his own life and the life of the victim of the car accident. Can he forgive himself and try to make a life on the outside? In Pushback, 16-year-old Zane's mother walked out of his life when he was 12. When his mom breaks yet another promise to take him back, he flees to an empty art studio he's taken refuge in before. When he trashes the studio and injures his owner, he faces charges and a possible criminal record, so he agrees to participate in a restorative justice program to keep from being kicked out again by his aunt. Zane works to fix the damage he's caused, but his attempts to stay on the right side of the law are challenged by a group of teens who want to recruit him into a gang. Can he complete the restorative justice program and prove himself worthy of a home, whether with his mother or not? Last but not least, we've got 2 standalone graphic novels with fantastic illustrations, as you can see here. If I Go Missing was originally a letter written by then 14-year-old Brianna Johnny to her city's chief of police about the ongoing epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. In her letter, Brianna calls out the authorities for neglecting to immediately investigate missing Indigenous people and urges them not to treat her as the Indigenous person she's proud to be if she were reported missing. Unfortunately, that's most of my time. I think we're going to have to skip over my last slide here, but you can all download the slides and the title list So just to quickly recap, we also have free teaching guides that can be used with books in most of our series, which can be downloaded from lorimer.ca/teachers, and you can keep an eye out for us on social media as @LorimerKids. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. And we will now hear from Wendy Vincent. Wendy is a former kindergarten teacher who has worked in educational product development and publishing for 13 years. In 2019, she completed a master's degree in equity and diversity in education and is proud to put her learning into action, developing books with Rourke Educational Media. Take it away, Wendy.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Ronnie. Like Ronnie said, I am from Rourke Educational Media, and we are a division of Carson DeLosa Education. We publish series and titles for library, classroom, and home use that support reading on a level that has no limits. I'm so happy to be here in such great company today talking about inclusive storytelling. And I'd like to start by talking about a series and creation team that we are so proud to share with our readers. These beautiful covers you are seeing on your screen are all from our new series, Leaders Like Us. Leaders Like Us will be an ongoing series, growing over the coming years to include the stories of leaders who embody a multitude of identities and backgrounds. We start the series with a focus on 6 Black leaders who have influenced the world, some well-known and others just gaining their deserved attention. Next slide, please. Leaders Like Us is an Own Voices series. These 6 titles were written by debut author J.P. Miller and illustrated by Markia Janai. I'm sharing a little more information about our creators on the screen, and JP wanted to join us today to share her story of creating these books, but was unable to be here. I would, however, like to share some of her words from a recent article she wrote for Up Close and Personal magazine about her journey to writing these titles. JP says, "As a child, I had a hunger to learn as much as I could about African American history. Unfortunately, books on the subject were sparse in my school's libraries. The desire to learn as much as I could about my culture never left me. One of the things that concerned me and was my driving force to start writing again was that 1, Black History Month was limited to just 1 month, and 2, during Black History Month, the same people were being discussed year in and year out. I knew there were others who had to have done some pretty amazing things too. I wanted young people to learn about them." JP goes on to say, "I am so excited about this series. It was a fun project to write, and I can't wait to see it in the hands of young readers." And I personally can't wait to show it to you and show you some of the pages. So next slide, please. Here you can see the interior of our Bayard Rustin title. These titles have beautiful full color and artful illustrations that really invite the reader into these unique stories. The text is highly researched and includes quotes from each leader. There's also a timeline of important events in each title and before and after reading reflections, great for discussions. Now let's meet the leaders. Next slide, please. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the godmother of rock and roll, who also planned one of the most unexpected concerts in history. Marshall Major Taylor, a cyclist once known as the fastest man in the world, who was nearly forgotten by history. And I had to add a slide here because we are very pleased to announce that, next slide please, Sister Rosetta Tharpe is now a book list reviewed title. We love Sister Rosetta, and JP will be doing an Insta TV read aloud of this title over the next few weeks on the Carson DeLosa social media accounts. And while you wait, just take a look at the inside of this joyful story of a rock and roll legend. And thank you, Booklist, for the review. Next, we have Shirley Chisholm, a pioneering politician, presidential candidate, founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and truly a woman who was, as her book describes, unbought and unbossed. Bayard Rustin, who worked to plan the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom and dedicated his life to civil rights, including advocacy in his LGBTQ+ community. Next slide. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, who, when she finished medical school, became the first Black woman doctor in the United States. It should be noted that even with her accomplishment, no photos exist that can be definitively identified as Dr. Crumpler, a great point of discussion for readers. And finally, Henry Louis Gates Jr., a professor, author, PBS host, the list goes on, who has helped many people trace family histories once feared lost. Next slide, please. We are so excited to finally release these titles available right now. And I'll leave you with a thought from JP. We asked her, what do you hope readers will learn from this series? And JP responded, I hope that readers will learn that they have everything they need inside themselves to be a leader and to make a difference in the world. We should also note that JP is working on a new series releasing in the spring using her experience as an Air Force veteran. She really does everything. And we're also talking about our next Leaders Like Us series release, so stay tuned for more in coming seasons. Next slide, please. Next, we'd like to present keepsake stories. The original titles in our existing keepsake bilingual fairy tales, although really awesome, are all centered in the storytelling experiences of only some readers. In order to make our storytelling more inclusive, we've decided to enlarge the circle, establishing the Keepsake Stories imprint. Through this new imprint, we will open the world of Keepsake to more stories and perspectives. We start with 4 stories from and inspired by Latin America. From the Day of the Dead celebration to a beautiful young cockroach who is all alone, these illustrated tales, told in both Spanish and English, will delight young readers and engage their families in shared multilingual reading experiences. Next slide, please. We'd also like to take a minute to showcase our author, Berta de Llama, and illustrator, Jaime Rivera Contreras, who reimagined and imagined these classic and new stories. So let's take a look at the beautiful titles by this team. Next slide, please. Citlali and the Day of the Dead, in which Citlali searches for a way to honor her abuela. The Trickster Tale of Coyote and Rabbit. The pictures in this one are absolutely hilarious. Next slide, please. Martina the Beautiful Cockroach, an adorable story about love featuring a tiny mouse and a tiny guayabera. And finally, The Day It Rained Buñuelos, a silly story that makes me hungry every time I read it. Next slide, please. And taking a look inside, you can see the text is written in Spanish with English translation at point of use for shared language reading. Before and after reading activities, writing prompts, and comprehension questions are also included. Next slide, please. Our new imprint Keepsake Stories will continue to provide tales that bring families together through shared reading experiences while supporting multilingual skills. These are available now. Next slide, please. So don't anyone get me in trouble, but y'all are the first ones outside of our product teams to see these titles that I sneaked into the presentation. But caution, what you are about to see could cause a cuteness overload. Please remember that these are not final visuals. Next slide, please. Presenting how to be friends. There are many ways to be a good friend. This fiction series teaches young readers how to be a good friend through vivid illustrations and empathy-focused stories. Children learn to model friendship-building skills in this easy-to-read pre-K2 series featuring in-demand fantasy characters on each title's 24 pages. Next slide, please. You can see from the beautiful interiors that these sweet stories focus on ways to be friends by communicating our feelings, listening to others, understanding that we all have different needs, and respecting the uniqueness of all of our friends. Let's take a look at our adorable titles. We have Mimi the Gnome and her new companion demonstrating how to respect friends' needs and limitations. Luma the Unicorn and their dragon pal dealing with illness and separation. And yes, there is a video chat scene in this one, very timely. Next slide, please. Walda the werewolf, who feels most safe when she can see the moon and needs a little reassurance from her friend. And finally, Milo the merman and his BFF, who teach readers about managing overwhelming situations and emotions. Next slide, please. And here are those beautiful interiors. You can see some of the interactions between the characters and how they show respect for listening to their friends and understanding their differences. Next slide, please. Each title in the How to Be Friends series is 24 pages and measures 8 by 8. Unfortunately, you'll have to wait to get your hands on these, but we think it will be worth it. These are available in January. Next slide, please. And finally, I also wanted to highlight some of our other titles, some from our fall release and some from our backlist that help tell inclusive stories. Of course, we have some titles like Meeting Nini, a story about a new friend with a disability, A Safe Cake, a story about food allergies, and Katie Can, a story about special needs that directly help readers understand, appreciate, and respect our differences. More than that, we are moving forward in ways that bring more inclusiveness to the other stories we tell. Some great examples include from our Good Sports series, Ava Kane in the Lane, in which Ava helps her friend Alonzo have courage, and Star Powers, our middle elementary chapter book series about the astronomical star powers and her passion for all things space. And in our nonfiction titles and series, you will see more and more images and topics that reflect and represent the kind of inclusion that make us all feel embraced. I have so many more titles I could share with you today, but you can see for yourself by visiting our website. Next slide, please. RourkeEducationalMedia.com. You can also feel free to contact me, wvincent@carsondelosa.com. I'd also like to remind you that JP Miller will be doing a read aloud of Sister Rosetta Tharpe next month, so follow us on all of our Carson DeLosa social media pages for sneak peeks, giveaways, and other author specials. You can also read an interview with Janice on our Carson DeLosa site, and she'll answer some questions to inspire readers of leaders like us. We were so happy to join you today, and we hope you enjoyed a quick look at some of our upcoming and standout titles.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And finally, we are going to bring up a previously recorded presentation from Amy Seto Forrester. Amy is a children's librarian at the Denver Public Library in Denver, Colorado. An active ALSC member, Amy is currently serving on the Nomination and Leadership Development Committee. She is also a co-founder and co-host of Guessing Geisel, a mock Geisel blog. So without further ado, let us hear what Amy has to say.
So what do you do when a customer asks for a classic title that you know has dated or concerning content? This happens to me a lot when I get asked for Little House on the Prairie, Peter Pan, The Secret Garden, Island of the Blue Dolphins, things that people have a lot of great memories associated with, but maybe the content isn't aging well. So you might have a lot of feelings when you have these kinds of requests. Sometimes I get anxious, sometimes I get angry, sometimes I feel like I'm shutting down. So a lot of things go through your mind when something like this happens. And as a children's librarian at a public library, I'm completely dedicated to fulfilling my customers' informational and recreational needs, right? We're here to help them find what they want. I can't change their mind about what they want, and that's not my job to do that. But at the same time, I'm committed to advocating for diversity, inclusion, and equity in children's literature. So you might wonder, is it possible to do both? So the short answer is sometimes. Sometimes the customer will have time. They'll be receptive. You'll see a look in their eye that says, I'm listening to you. Sometimes the customer will be in a rush. Often at my library, their parking meter is running down and they just don't have time. Sometimes they will be the only person in the library and you can have that conversation with them. And sometimes you have 50 hyper third graders who are just all looking to get onto those 5 computers. So you kind of have to gauge the situation, make an informed judgment about whether or not this is the time. It also depends on if you feel like you're ready to put yourself out there. And I think as people who work on the front lines with customers all the time and do customer service, some days we are having a harder day. And I think it's okay to say, today is not my day. But I also think it's okay to be brave too. Be brave. Try some of these ideas. Use that informed judgment based on you and the customer and the environment. So my goal when I was creating this document that I'm going to share with you, and I've been thinking about this the last couple of years, is to recommend along. So you can read it along with a classic to provide an additional perspective, or they could be read instead of a classic. So you can kind of give customers options. Because sometimes when we say this book is old, it doesn't do what you thought it did, it's not as good as you remember, people will shut down. But if you say, this is a great way to build more perspectives into the story, to gain more access and more context, that can be a really great way to go. So for instance, I have a customer who's asking for The Secret Garden, which has some problematic content in the way that it talks about people who live in India. I would also say, here's a copy of The Secret Garden. I'm happy to recommend some other books that provide different perspectives, like the 3 that you see on the screen in front of you. Or if I'm asked for Little House on the Prairie, I would show them where those books are, but then see if maybe they've thought about the way that Native Americans are depicted in the book and suggest maybe they read The Birch Bark House or one of these other books because it's set during the same time period, but gives some different perspectives. Bronze and Sunflower is set in China in the 1970s during the Cultural Revolution, and Our Only May Amelia is set in the Washington Territory, I believe, in the 1800s. So not exactly the same time period, but they have a similar feel to them. Birch Bark House, of course, is the same time period and nearby location. So you could also think about giving customers modern classics, so things that you feel will stand the test of time. Excellent books. You might try books like those by K.T. Camillo or The Pinckneys, Jason Reynolds, and on and on and on. Insert your favorite here. I oftentimes think that people ask for classics because they think those are the good books, right? The well-written ones, the ones their child should be reading or they should be reading to their child. And sometimes we have the opportunity as library staff to sort of give them a jumping off place for maybe some authors they would really enjoy. Does this work every time? Absolutely not. I have crashed and burned when trying to recommend along. It does take practice, definitely. The more you do it, the more comfortable you are doing it, the less anxiety will be provoked by these conversations. But I think it's worth it, most definitely, because providing opportunities for kids and families to experience windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, as Rudine Sims Bishop coined the term, is always worth the effort. It's such a small thing that I can do in my daily work to contribute to something bigger and more important that I think it's worth the effort. So I've linked here to the diverse recommend-alongs document that I put together. It is geared for Denver Public Library staff, so hopefully there's not any jargon that's confusing to you. It's based on things that we have readily available in our catalog. But if you have any questions about the document or the slides today, I would be happy to take those. You can email me at aforrester@denverlibrary.org. I'd be happy to talk anytime.
So thanks to Amy for that. Thanks to you all for joining us today, and another thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. On Monday, All attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, a certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. If you haven't already, be sure to check out Booklist Reader, where Booklist contributors post daily about all things books and library land. Did you know Booklist content is freely available to all until the end of this month? Start reading with our digital edition, a format that pairs the page-by-page reading experience of print with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com. And lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. One more thank you to our sponsors, Choose Your Own Adventure, Owlkids, Lorimer Children and Teens, and Rourke Educational Media. This concludes today's webinar.